So I will stand upon your word, your promises that I could never earn, 'cause it's your grace that takes me to your sea.
Anyway, to the show, very hot topic, and I know we talked that, we start off with a little bit of humor and a little bit of lightness there. The reason is because this is a very serious topic. It's no joke, and the topic is when you give up on God and maybe even hate Him. And this is going to be part one because it's going to take a while. We won't even put our toe in the water tonight because there's just so much to talk about it, okay? So much to talk about. And we love having you here too, Michelle. Thank you for that comment there. So when you give up on God and even hate Him, meaning, can that happen? Sounds like, well, why would anybody feel that way? And what if it does happen? What are the dangers? Are there dangers of saying, God, I hate you? Is there a danger in that? Will God give up on us and hate us back? Is it the ultimate sin? Will we lose our salvation? Will we bring ourselves into a place of being under a curse or something? Well, we're going to answer all these questions and more in this special Hot Topic series. And the reason why we're talking about this, because I don't want to shock you people, but it happens. It does happen. In fact, for those who think I'm so great, I'm really not. I keep trying to convince you people because I have been there. I have been very angry at God, okay? I don't know if I'd say I'd hate Him, but I've been very angry at Him. And there are times when I thought about giving up on Him. Yes, in my, 38 years of being a Christian, yes, I've been there, okay? Plus, if you were here for our evening service, remember, I do have a haughty spirit, so just remember that. So that is a problem. But anyway, what does that mean? If I, as a pastor, have been angry at God, if I, as a Christian and a pastor, have wanted to walk away from ministry, does that mean I'm done as a Christian and a pastor? Or is there something more to this topic? Well, before we dig into those answers and many more, I want to ask you guys, we have a nice turnout tonight. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to put some questions out there, make some comments, email us. Yes, don't forget to email us with suggestions also. Pastor Scott, cbc@gmail.com, Scott with 2 T's, or you can message us through, we do have Life Talk Live at Gmail. Oh, we have an email, I didn't even know, lifetalklive7@gmail.com. It's a good thing Sally's here. She's bringing all these things together here. I thought we had an email. Okay, so I want to ask you guys, and this is kind of a rhetorical thing because you might feel funny saying it, but by putting up those thumbs and those likes and everything and commenting either way, have you ever been angry at God? Anyone out there ever been angry at God? Anyone ever felt like giving up on God? Oh yeah, and there's our email, lifetalk7@gmail.com. Is that what it is? Lifetalk. Oh, it's lifetalklive7@gmail.com. Scratch that there. So, yep. So we have some people being honest here, saying yes, they've been angry at God, maybe giving up on God and saying, "What's the point?" Okay. Maybe having those thoughts, you know what, I'm going to go back to my old life. I'm done being a Christian. I've had it. It's not working. What's the point? Okay? I've said that. I've thought about it. I have in my 38 years of being a Christian. That's crossed my mind, okay? And I think it's crossed your mind too. Yep, okay, we're good. They're all popping up here. Okay, Tom says he's been angry but never gave up. That's good. That's good, Tom. That's good. So we have people who are confirming that they've been through this, and I'm sure just about everybody. Thank you. Yes, Haughty Spirit. If you want to learn about my Haughty Spirit, you can check out our link on that study that we just posted there. Okay, so let's talk about it. Well, what's the best place to start talking about such a very, very uncomfortable subject? Well, I think it would be to ask, has anyone famous been there in our time? And jumps right out at me, and I know there are many more. David Wilkinson, one of my Bible teaching heroes. If you don't have his devotional, God is Faithful, get it, by David Wilkinson. On one of his daily readings, he wrote down that sometimes life will get so hard and the enemy will pound you so deeply, there might even be times when you even question if God is even real. Does he even exist? And am I just living in this fantasy that there's a God? Those horrific, demonic thoughts will enter your ear. Don't think you're alone with that, okay? But that type of thing, and I want to put that on the side for a second, because questioning if God is even real, that can happen in the beginning of your walk, but that shouldn't happen anymore. I mean, I've been through many dark times, and it is impossible for me to question if God is real, because he is. It's so obvious. I know it is as much as I know I'm sitting here. But the angry part and just wanting to walk away sometimes and just say, it's just too hard. I know when I die I'll go to heaven. I'm good to go, but it's just too hard. Okay, so. Oh, that devotion, Tom, was called God is Faithful. I think I gave you guys a copy. Normally everyone who comes to CBC gets a copy of God is Faithful. David Wilkinson. You can get it on Amazon. Maybe we can post that link. It's the Green Book. But anyway, that's somebody in modern times. What about in the Bible? Okay? What about in the Bible? This is an interesting thing. Are there any people in the Bible who have been angry at God, hated God, given up on God, questioned God, and wanted to walk away? Well, you are going to be in for a big treat tonight, people, because I got tons of them. Tons of them, okay? Let's start, okay? Abraham, okay? Father Abraham expressed his disappointment and anger that he was feeling towards God as he got old, because God promised him he was going to have a son, and it wasn't happening. Genesis 15, 1 through 3. Moses, leading the Israelites for a long time, he came to a place where he was disappointed and angry at God because of all the problems he had to deal with in leading such a large group. He even told God in Numbers 11, 10 through 15, if you're going to, and this is kind of a, paraphrase of this, if you're going to keep treating me like this, please kill me now. Okay? Have you ever thought that? That's an interesting question. Have you ever said, God, just take my life? I have. God, just kill me. Just get me out of here. Okay? Moses was a great man of God. I would venture to say in the Bible, Abraham, but Moses. All of your three, big religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, Moses is in there. He's a big guy. He's an important part. But he got angry. He got angry. Okay? There was another famous time when Moses got violently angry at God when he struck the rock, and God said, don't hit the rock. He was impatient with God because God said the water would come from the rock. It wasn't happening, so he took matters into his own hand, and he took a stick and hit the rock. Numbers 20, verse 11. God was so upset with that it kept Moses from entering the promised land, something that Moses looked forward to his entire life. Wow. 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 Moses' anger also showed itself with his interactions with the Israelites. And that's not being mad at God, but he was known to lose his temper, dealing with problems, and the people just, it's a problem. And it just shows you that even a godly person like Moses can lose it. But let's move on. David, King David, that I love so much, he was mad at God when God struck down Uzzah, U-Z-Z-A-H, dead, when they were crossing the little stream, and he touched the Ark of the Covenant to keep it from tipping, when God says, don't touch the Ark. And the guy thought he was doing a good thing. It's an interesting thing. Do you ever think you were doing something good for God, helping him, and God is actually mad at you? David was mad at God. 2 Samuel 6, 1 through 8. This is a heavy one. David's fury over the death of his child Absalom. Boy, if anything can bring you to be angry at God, it's probably, of the people that I counsel and I deal with, people who lose a loved one, that's probably the first thing. And I asked them, I always ask them, and when I do grief counseling, are you mad at God? And many times they'll say, yes, I am. Why would God do this? David was furious. The death of Absalom was one of the most tragic events in David's life. David was filled with grief and fury when he heard that his son had been killed. He cursed the man who killed Absalom and ordered him to be put to death. David's rage was so great that he refused to speak to anyone for days. It was a turning point for David, and it put him into a great funk and a great depression. He withdrew from people, became paranoid. He no longer had that zeal that led Israel to victory. David, like many other people, showed that even great men and someone that God loved immensely are not perfect. But are there more? Right? Are there more? Jonah got mad at God for sparing the citizens of Nineveh. Jonah chapter 3, verses 10, Jonah chapter 4, verses 1 through 4. As a matter of fact, he got so mad at God that he asked God to kill him. Quite a few people in the Bible said, just take my life, God. I wish I've never been born. Jonah was so upset because he was called to do a mission for God that he resented. He hated the job. He didn't want to be there. He ran away from God's calling, and to boot, he ran in the opposite direction. He resented the orders that God gave him, and he basically, when you resent what God has told you to do, you basically are attempting to control your own destiny. After Jonah continued to express his anger for being chosen for this mission, he just never really recuperated. And when we read the story of Jonah, he ended up just angry. He knew what he had to do, but he was very unhappy. Here's a person in the Bible that, boy, is actually known for his weeping. Jeremiah the prophet. Jeremiah once reached an emotional low point in his ministry, and he expressed his disappointment and his anger at God, asking him, check this out, and have you ever said this? Why is my pain perpetual and my wound incurable, which refuses to be healed? Will you be to me like an unreliable stream, as waters that fail? Jeremiah 15:18. Wow. That's some heavy words against God. And he had more. Peter was angry at Jesus Christ, who we know who was God in the flesh. Matthew 16:21-22. When Jesus says to the disciples, apostles, I'm going to die. Peter rebuked Jesus, says, no, you're not. You're not dying. Job, you know Job is going to come up here. Job is another example in the Bible of a character angry with God. And we can say, rightly so maybe. He was a righteous man, and in this particular case, this was not correction. It wasn't. Job did absolutely nothing wrong. Yet he suffered great loss and was angry and bitter about God and why God allowed it to happen. Have you ever thought that? God, why did you allow this to happen to my family, to my husband, to my wife, to my child, to my body? The book of Job shows his emotions as he asks God, why am I being afflicted so harshly? Why aren't you defending me, God? Job often questioned why God had given him a life of suffering and pain. Especially when he said, God, I didn't do anything wrong. He also bemoaned how his faith in God's fairness had been betrayed. God, I trusted in your fairness. You're a fair God. But I can't understand why you allowed the righteous to suffer. It's not fair. In the end, he questions the very existence of good people in the world when they are subject to such a harsh treatment from God the Father. Job believed that if there was a God out there, he should not be allowed to suffer. Good people shouldn't suffer. His anger towards God is evident throughout the book. That even when his friends tried to comfort him, and they weren't too much of good comforters, they were miserable comforters. No matter what they said in trying to figure out why Job's life was so hard, Job never found any comfort from them. Did that ever happen to you? It's interesting. You ever going through a real hard time out there, and good, and maybe even Christian, good godly friends are trying to encourage you with scripture and songs and words of encouragement and things they've been through, and in your mind you're saying, thank you very much, but it's not helping. Okay? My pain ain't going away, and I'm very flat. And you might not say that, but you think it. How about this? Elijah. Elijah's delusionment with false prophets. Elijah was angry at God. He was another person who wanted to die. Meaning it can be easy to get disillusioned with God when the things we have faith in don't come to pass. Okay? Elijah trusted God. He knew his word and he stood on it, but what was needing to happen, the good guys winning, wasn't happening. Elijah was surrounded by false prophets who were leading God's people astray, and he thought surely God would be mad at this, as Elijah was. So Elijah launched into a rage against God when he felt all of his efforts were for nothing. It was a waste because the false prophets won in the end. He was angry and disappointed that his work, ordained by God, was in vain. And I think if you're in ministry, if you're a pastor, I know how many times I've had this conversation with God. Why am I doing this? It's a waste. No one's getting it. It's not doing anything. Maybe someone else is better for this job. I don't understand why this is happening to this person or that person. They came so long in Christ and put so much effort. That's probably a big thing, is when you put a lot of effort into people and you feed them the word and you see them grow, and then they get hit with something really heavy. And you're kind of shocked yourself, and you're going, oh, Lord, that poor family. Why would that happen? Why would you do that? Anybody ever been there? This is an interesting place where you wouldn't think that you'd find a lot of complaints and anger, in the book of Psalms. You know, the book of Psalms is where we go to for comfort. Okay, that's why it's right in the middle of the Bible. Always remember that. If you ever want to find the book of Psalms, just take the Bible and open it up right in the middle, and you will be in the book of Psalms, which is very convenient when you're in the middle of an emergency. You don't want to be searching around for comfort. But yet, even in the book of Psalms, which are a collection of 150 songs, really, and poems, but many of them are expressions of intense pain and suffering. Many of the psalmists often vent about their frustrations to God, questioning His justice and His power. Why, God, why? How about this book? Well, the name says it all, the book of Lamentations. You know what the book of Lamentations says? It's a book of laments. It's a book in the Bible of complaints. A whole book filled with them. In the book of Lamentations, there is expressions of deep sorrow over losses, sufferings, injustice, sometimes experienced by an individual, sometimes by the nation of Israel. These laments are often from God's ancient people as they despair and they share their feelings with God, their anger at God for the suffering in their lives and the pain and loss due to death and other circumstances. In Psalm 44, the writer says, "We are brought down to nothing and have become like a sparrow alone on the top of a house." So what's the conclusion? And I can go on. And just to go off on a little side note here, we got plenty of time here tonight. One of the things I find fascinating about the Bible, for the people, for the naysayers who say the Bible is just made up by men, it's not really of God. How do you know it's of God? Well, you know how I know it's of God, and I say this all the time? Because if let's just say today, I was going to start a new religion, the religion of Scott. We're going to call it Scottisms, okay? You're going to become a Scottist, okay? And I was going to write my own little religious book. Well, if I wanted a lot of people to follow me, I would have in that book only good things. That if you follow me, and you give me money, and you are my best bud, only great, wonderful things are going to happen. And I would give you story after story. Every page would be wonders of miracles. I would have nothing ever negative in it. And I certainly wouldn't let anyone write in my book about how bad I am. But why does God allow it? People, that's the very proof that this is God's book. Because God allows humanity. God allows humanity to say what's on their mind. God's not afraid. And even as we listen to our theme song, Hold On at the end, I love that line. You know my cries and the crazy thoughts, but it doesn't bother you, God. And that's the amazing thing about God. He allows us to just go and just vomit out all of our pains and all of our anger. And He never slaps us. He never says, "I'm done with you." He smiles and He says, "Child, just get it out of your system. It's okay." It is the unconditional love of God. Can you imagine if we had friends who just came up to us and said, you know what, I have to tell you, you have caused me so much grief. I'm done with you. I'm so angry at you. I don't want to see you anymore. I'm not going to be your friend. You remember when you were a kid in school? Remember that? Remember when that was like the worst thing? I'm not going to be your friend anymore. It's like, oh, man. Like when you were like in like 4th or 5th grade. Not my friend. It's like it was devastating, right? Today, people don't actually say that. They just torture you on Facebook and stuff like that and make your life miserable. But God doesn't do that. He allows it. And to me, that is the greatest proof that this book is not written by man. Because why would, if it was a big scam, I always tell people, if the Bible is the biggest scam in the world, concocted over thousands and thousands of years, how could you either have it all come together and fit perfectly? Why would you have such hard-hitting things, realities of life, that in this life you're going to have tribulation? Why not just make it a big carnival show, just all great stuff? There is great stuff in there. This is the gospel, the good news, and God's miracles and promises. But he never holds back the truth, because God doesn't want you to ever be able to say, hey, God, you said this and this happened. But the irony is, by these very people, we do say that, okay? Even though God said, but I told you it was going to be hard. There's going to be times when people are going to hate you. People are going to betray you. You are going to be, things are not going to go your way. There's going to be death. There's going to be struggles, okay? So I think that's a great proof for the very authenticity of the Bible. Marion said, I'm calling Justin Peters about my new Scottish religion. Yes, please don't follow the Scottish religion. I'm a Scottishist. I don't know what we would call it. But whatever it is, don't follow it, please. But anyway, with all that said, and joking around, because it is a real heavy thing, and maybe you're there tonight listening, and I know, as even we've seen from the comments, losing a loved one, that's a tough one. I remember, and it always sticks in my head, the pastor before me, my mentor, I remember him teaching once. He says, if you're a follower of Christ and you say, God, I'll follow you anywhere, I trust you, I believe you, you're the greatest, but if you add this, but if you take my spouse, if you take my child, then we're done. If that's the tag to your relationship with God, then you really don't have a relationship. And the sad thing is, how many of us have been there? How many of us secretly say, God, you know what, this is too much, losing a loved one. And I have, thank God, I lost my dad. It wasn't really that hard to go through, but, losing a mom, a wife, a child. I know people in our very church. I know when the sickness happened, I know many people who lost loved ones. And you know what's an amazing thing? And I have to tell you this: the people, and I am always so honored. We have a lot of people in this church, and some of them have lost loved ones, husbands and children. They come, some of them, that next Sunday they're in church and they're worshiping God. People, if there's ever proof that God is real, because why would you? See, the real thing is, the real believer would not give up on God. They would be hurt and torn. And, I know I would be, but you wouldn't give up on God. You know why? Because God won't let you. Because God is real. And we don't follow him just because he gives us ice cream. We follow him because of who he is, the Creator. Got a couple of comments here. Losing the mom, very painful. Dorothy, hey Dorothy, good to see you. Lost 2 of her brothers Those are tough things. They're tough. They're tough. But God got you through the losses, yes. You know, being a pastor, I hold a lot of hands of people at funerals and go through these things, and you know, I say a kind word and we read some scripture and we pray, and you know, I walk away and go home, and those people have to continue on with that. And what keeps them continuing on is that they know that God is good. But what we're going to do tonight, as we wind down here a little bit, what is the conclusion? Why would God? And this is what I promise you. We're going to answer these things, okay, in part 2. Why would God allow things to happen in your life that are so painful and so hurtful that you would get angry at Him? Okay. I guess you can say the same thing. Why would a parent tell a child, no, you're going to bed, you're not having ice cream, and to know that that child is so disappointed and angry at them? Why would you say no? Why would you take something away? Why would you punish them? Interesting. See where I'm going with that? But how about these things? How about these questions? Where do we go when we get to that place? Okay? When you get to the place where you are very angry at God. I've been angry at God where I've yelled, Donnie, God, I don't know why you're doing this. Why? Why must I go through this? Or why must my church go through this? Or my family or my child? I've been there. I've shared the story with you guys when I took over my first church in California. Just a quick real story. I don't want to go blah, 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 and you've heard it 100 times and make it sound greater than it is. But I had a great job here, my dream job, tons of money. I left it all, moved all the way to California, sold everything I had, took over a little tiny church. They couldn't pay me anything. I had to work in menial labor. I went from being up here in the corporate business life to being sweeping garbage and running a church and just not being able to see my family. And it was in California. It was hot. And I remember one day at work, and I'm, working with a hammer and ripping down lumber and stuff. I'm getting yelled at by my supervisor, who's like 15 years younger than I am. And I just lost it. I lost it. I said, God, I did this all for you. I left my job, my career, college for my kids, and health benefits, and all those things. I left it all. I moved all the way to California to take over this rinky-dink church for you. And I hate it. Why would you do this? And I remember calling my, back then we had the Nextel phones, if you remember them, on the construction job. I remember calling my wife and screaming at her, I'm done, and I'm not coming home. I said, I'm going out, and I'm going to get drunk. Yeah, it's kind of like spiting God. Did you ever want to spite God? I'm going to go out, I'm going to do some bad stuff. Some bad stuff tonight. I really said that, and I was a pastor. It's the truth, people. And I got in my truck. I worked the rest of the day. I drove all the way home. I never did anything. By the time I got home, it was all past. And again, I always hearing God saying, are you done now? Are you okay? Because I know there's a plan. And I went back to work, and and things worked out. But boy, you can get there. You could hit your finger with a hammer in the middle of doing something, and just it pushes you over the edge. The perfect storm. And my supervisor yelling at me and telling me, pick up that garbage. And when I was such an important person where I used to be, and I was so insulted, my pride. We can get angry. Yes, we could feel left behind, Michelle says here. Left behind when when we're abandoned. I've heard that a lot lately from families, people that their families have turned on them. That's really alone, because without family, wow, that's hard. That's hard. So we're going to answer these things. Okay, we've already answered a couple. So can this happen? Can you give up on God and hate Him? Yeah, you can. What happens if it does happen? What are the dangers? That's what we're going to talk about. Will God give up on us and hate us? I think you know the answer. But I'll show you scriptures. Is it the ultimate sin? No. It's not the ultimate sin. You know what the ultimate sin is? The unpardonable sin? Denying Jesus Christ. That's the only thing that sends you to hell. Denying His work on the cross. But again, let's just say you're in this place right now, wherever you are, where you've just had it up to here, and you're trying to put on, what do? You put on the big smiley face, and God is great. You might even go to church, and sometimes you don't, and that's an interesting we'll talk about next week. The trying to get back at God. It's kind of a funny thing we do, that we think we're going to spite Him. We're going to twist God's arm, and He's going to cry uncle and say, okay, you win. I'll give you what you want. We actually think that in our minds, that we're going to, I'll show you, God. Now I'm not going to church anymore. I'm not giving my money anymore. I'm not going to be good anymore. Tired of being good. I'm just going to go back to my old life, which is impossible. And I did a whole study on how hard it would be to go back. You know what? You can't go back to your old life, because if you did, you know who goes with you? Jesus Christ. You can't get rid of Him, okay? If you wanted to go out and party and say, I'm just going to let loose, and you won't enjoy it, because you're not the same person. But that's for another study. But what do we do when we're in these places? Okay? And why would God allow them? These are the things we're going to talk about next week. Let's see, we've got a couple of comments here. A lot of comments. Thank you, people. It's really great. Tom says for the past 3 years, him and his wife, family almost abandoned them. Never had a holiday dinner with our families yet. These stories seem to be more common today than they've ever been. Because didn't Jesus say about the days in which we live that your very enemies might be of your own household? Your children might turn on you. Your very children. It's hard. People will forsake us. Got to get prepared for that. They will forget us. Sometimes not even intentionally. But we become so sensitive to it because we've been hurt so bad that we just assume everyone's going to let us down. And that's not true. But even if they did, what do we do about God when it appears that He let us down? Well, that's going to be for next week. But I'm going to give you a word or a statement to get you to next week. Okay? Hold on. As our song says, help is coming. Help is coming. And I'm going to give you a clue to chew on. I'm going to give you a little clue, because think about it, people. Many times, not saying every time, but many times, when people are angry at God, guess who they're really angry at? Themselves. And it's easier to blame God for how everything turned out than ourselves. I'm not saying in every case. You lose a loved one, you can't, unless you were, negligent or something. But but in many cases, our anger is towards God. And it's always interesting to me that atheists, whenever I meet an atheist or an agnostic, they secretly hate God. It's so strange. They hate a God that they don't believe in, and it's like, well, how can you? Why do you hate God if you don't even believe He exists? It's like hating Santa Claus. You know, I hate Santa Claus. Oh, hating an elf. I hate elves. Well, if they don't exist, how can you hate them? Well, I just hate them. And it's kind of a strange thing. But if this sparked a nerve, if you know anyone, and I'm sure you do, who has been through this, who is going through something like this, and I can bet you'll probably go through something like this in the future if you haven't. Well, we're going to go through the answers. And they're not going to just be your pet answers, just trust God and shut up. No, I don't like giving answers like that. Okay? God is faithful. Yeah, He's faithful. No, what do we really need to hear? I'm talking when you got to get out and go to work in the morning, and this is not a joke. This is reality. There's no money to pay the bills. There's possibility you're going to be evicted. Your car's not starting and you don't have money to fix it. You're living alone and you're getting older and you have no one. These are not imaginary things. These are real things, and you have to, I'm going to have to give you, or God's going to have to give us something that's not just a nice little catchphrase that we hang on a wall. I got a bunch of scriptures and catchphrases all over my house. And you know what? Sometimes they're not enough when you're going through the fire. The fire. Just looking at a couple of comments. How do you hate somebody or something if there is no belief? That's a good point. It's a good point, right? You have to believe in something to hate it, I would assume, right? But anyway, heavy thing tonight, okay? And I apologize it's a heavy thing, but this is real, right? And let me see from you guys here. Is this a topic that you want to know the answer to? Is this something that's important? Or should we just skip this and maybe just talk about all the great things God's going to do? Because we could do that. I mean, and we should talk about the promises of God. There's tons of them, and we can share all the wonderful things He's done in our life. But is this something that we need to talk about? Do you think this is a topic that's not really spoken of? Yeah, I thought so. I know so. I know so. And we got to talk about these things. And God, like we're going to hear in the song, is not afraid of our doubts. Don't you think God knows that we're going to have doubts? And this is what you do. A wonderful song by Kaylee Druick. When I'm scared, you tell me, hold on. When I feel doubt and my head is spinning all around, I love this line. You hear my questions, and they don't scare you. I love that line that 12-year-old girl wrote. You hear my questions, and they don't scare God. God is not afraid of us asking Him these things. He wants us to. Got to get to that secret place. That's the clue. You know my heart. You calm my fears. You comfort me when I don't even understand my tears. Did you ever cry and not even know why you're crying?
So I will trust you, and I will follow, 'cause I
There's the clue.
believe you're good.
The song itself holds the answer.
You know my heart, you calm my fears. You comfort me when even I don't understand my tears. You see my love, you hear my questions.
See my thoughts. You hear my questions, and they don't scare you.
You calm my fears. You comfort me when even I don't understand my tears. You see my love, you hear my questions.
They don't scare you. When I am weak, you make me strong. That's biblical. When I'm scared. Hold on till next week, people. We'll see you then, Lord willing.